Welcome to the High Desert branch of the California Writers Club's first year participating in the National African American Read-In. The National African American Read-In is the nation's first and oldest event dedicated to diversity in literature. It was established in 1990 by the Black Caucus of the National Council of Teachers of English to make literacy a significant part of Black History Month. This initiative has thus far reached more than 6 million participants around the world, so that's great. And we need to really take time right now to especially acknowledge the member of our club who proposed participating in this and then coordinated this wonderful event, and that is Dr. Mary Thompson, who is at the rear of the room. Mary, please stand so we can acknowledge you. Thank you so much. Now, Black History Month itself has been celebrated in the United States since 1976. However, its roots started in 1926 when Harvard-trained historian Carter G. Woodson and others who founded the Association for the Study of the Negro Life and History sponsored a national Black History Week. And that first week of celebration was actually the second week of February. So for many years, the celebration was a week-long celebration, the second week in February. And again, now it has grown to an entire month in February. And it was former President Gerald Ford who officially recognized Black History Month in 1976, calling upon the public to, I'm going to quote him, to seize the opportunity to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout our history, end of quote. Now today, what we're going to do is we're going to have some readings, and we're going to begin with members of the High Desert Writers Club. And I'm going to go down the list. If you all have the programs, we're going to try to follow it. So if you see your name, we're going to ask you to come in order. And one of the first things we'd like you to do when you come up is be sure to state your name so we'll know who has participated and who might have to change up the program a little bit. And after the Writers Club members have read, then we're going to take a short break to mingle, fellowship, so to speak, have refreshments, and then we're going to have others who would like to participate to read any of your choices. And for those who may have decided to read only after getting here and didn't bring anything, we've got plenty of material, so you can use some of the material that's in the back of the room if you would just like to read. And everyone will come up here, like I said, state your name, and then read your piece. We're asking you to keep it to between 5 and 7 minutes, or to basically say no more than 7 minutes. If you do it a minute, that's fine, but no more than 7 minutes so we can get everyone in. And I'm going to ask everyone to refer to, there were some handouts also at the table, I don't know if everybody got them, that had the lyrics to the Black National Anthem, or Lift Every Voice. Is everybody familiar with Lift Every Voice? For those who don't have the lyrics, they are at the rear table, because I'm going to ask you to help me sing it. The history of that song is really interesting. It was initially written as a poem for President Abraham Lincoln's birthday, okay? And the writer wrote it as a poem, and it was first publicly performed by 500 school children. So it was interesting that later on, members of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People took the song as their own official song. And that information, the history, is also on the lyrics page. And Bob is helping pass that out. Thanks, Bob. While he gets that, yeah. Just a little bit more of the history of that song, in addition to the writers of the song, who actually were brothers. There was one brother who wrote the music, and another brother who wrote the lyrics to the song. But at traditional, I'll say traditional and historical African American celebrations during Black History Month especially, usually events start with this song. Okay, so I'm sure like the NAACP, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and other more formal dinners and luncheons that are taking place during Black History Month, usually we begin with this song. And some of you may know that I think it was singer Melba Moore who made it really popular a few decades ago too, because she just held one of the notes very long for like a minute or two, and we won't be doing that tonight, but I should say, any of you who can do that, go for it. And I have, on some of your handouts, you'll have 2 of the verses. It's actually a 3-verse song. And I thought if we get through the first verse, that will be representative enough. And like I said, some of your handouts have 2 of the 3 verses. And for those who may not know the melody, I'm going to hum it a little bit, and then we'll do the verse. It kind of starts like this. And this was a special requested song because someone thinks that I'm a good singer. I'm a good background singer, so that's why I'm enlisting help. I'm good when there are other people singing along with me. So I'm going to ask everybody to use what I know someone from my parents' church calls your outside voice when we sing, and so that we can be heard. Do, 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 do. Let our rejoicing rise high at the listening skies. Let it resound loud as a rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Excellent, you did a great job. So as I said, I know a few of the names that are here, so I'm going to just do a quick check-in. Martha Dickerson, you're here, correct? Is Jolene here? Great. James? Valerie? Rita Wells is here. Joan Rudder is here. Emelisa. Anita Holmes. Anita's not yet here. Dwight and Gerald. Okay, so most of us are here, so please, again, in the order that you're listed, just come up, give your name, and we're ready to enjoy your reading. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I brought my cell phone so that I can time myself. I tend to be a little long-winded, and I don't want to go over 7 minutes. So I'm starting now. The first thing I'm going to read is a book I wrote, and the book, it's a children's book, and it's about a leaf that falls from a tree, and the other leaves are dealing with the death or the fallen leaf because he's gone, and so they're dealing with their grief. And so I wrote it because I had a student, a 4th grade student, whose mother was dying with stage 4 cancer. And so I didn't know there were very few books out there that addressed that issue about children dealing with death and dying. And since then, I found out that it's more and more prevalent than I thought. So I'll read a little bit from the book verse. It says, "One day Henry was happily sitting on a branch in the tree when a strong wind blew in. Henry tried hard to hold on to the tree as the wind whipped him back and forth. The wind continued to blow. "Oh," cried Henry, "oh, I think I'm losing my grip." Henry swayed back and forth. He trembled. Suddenly, calmness moved over the trembling leaf. That wasn't so bad, said Henry. At that moment, the stem snapped, and Henry floated gently to the ground with the other fallen leaves. Henry lay on the soft dirt, looking back at the place from where he had been attached for so long. He began to grow weary. He was cut off from his friends and family. He could no longer get nutrients from the tree. His lamina began to fade. Life drained from Henry. His beautiful color became brown. Farmer John came and raked up the fallen leaves and moved them to the compost pile. Henry McSensory was now in the compost. And that's just a little excerpt from the book. If you get the book, it tells you what happened to the other leaves and how they mourn and what they did to help them get over the fact that their friend was gone. The poem I'm going to read from is by Langston Hughes. And it says, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? Langston Hughes, according to what I found on the internet, he first wrote this poem in 1951, and it was dealing with a dream deferred. A poem refers to American dreams of rights, equality, of opportunity for prosperity and success, liberty and democracy, which at that time was when Hughes wrote the poem, was denied to most African Americans. And respond to his question at the beginning of the poem, Hughes gives examples of what happened to things when deferral and negligence, and asks whether the same thing is happening to all people or to just African American dreams. The other poem, is, it says mother to son. This one really touched me, because at the time when I discovered this poem, I had a teenage son, and he was just, as most, if you have had teenage kids, you know they have their own mind, and he was just didn't want to go to school. I was trying to get him at VBC. He was 17, he's 40 now. But he was just giving me a hard time. So this poem resonated with me when I read it, and I read it to him, and he just shrugged it off. But I think now that he's dealing with his kids, it's coming back to him. So the poem says, mother to son. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time I's been a-climbing on and reaching landing and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back, don't you sit down on those steps, 'cause you find it kinda hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey. I's still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Those are my two poems, and
hi, I'm Jolene Dallin. I'm going to read Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard? 'Cause I laugh alike I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the husk of history's shame I rise, up from a past that rooted in pain I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror, and I rise. Into a daybreak that wordlessly clear I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. And then I have another one, Tending by Elizabeth Alexander. In the pull-out bed with my brother, in my grandfather's Riverton apartment, my knees and ankles throbbed from growing, pulsing so hard they kept me awake. Or was it the Metro North train cars flying past the apartment, rocking the walls? Or was it the sound of the apartment front doors, as heavy as prison doors clinging shut? Was the black nation whispering to me from the Jet magazine stacked on the floor? Or was it my brother's unfamiliar ions vibrating, humming in his easeful sleep? Tomorrow, as always, grandfather will rise to the Spanish town cocks crowing deep in his head and perform his usual ablations and prepare the apartment for the day and peel fruit for us and prepare a hot meal that can take us anywhere and onward. Did sleep elude me because I could feel the heft of unuttered love in his tending our small bodies, love a silent mammoth thing that overwhelmed me, that kept me awake as my growing boats did, growing larger than anything else I would know.
Okay, I would like to share, I'm a retired elementary school teacher, and I taught kindergarten for 5 years, but mostly second, third, and fourth. But when I taught kindergarten for 5 years, I collected ABC books, alphabet books, and every time Scholastic had one, I would buy one. Well, this one is a book of black heroes from A to Z. And it works perfectly not only for kindergarten, but for older kids, because there's so much history. When I was going through it, I didn't know all the things to pick, because there's so many in here, and I got excited because the singer is in my book. So Johnson, and I think I was going to start with him, because he's right in here, and it's perfect for the kids, and it's just enough to give you information, and then you can look it up. But he's right here. He wasn't one of the ones I picked, but I almost did, and when she has the song there, I got all excited. I said, well, this will work. So this is what they said about the man that she has the song for that we sang.
Excuse me, read it. Turn the mic off if we're just hearing the ones.
You want me to just use, see, it's loud. Right here, it's off.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, this is James Weldon Johnson, and he was born in, you have the information, 1871, and he passed away in 1938, and his birthplace was Johnston, Florida. And in quotes, they have "a way with words." And then it says, the song, a little paragraph, "Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty." And it says, these were beautiful words that would be sung long after James Weldon Johnson was dead. In 1900, James wrote his verse to music composed by his brother John. They fit. Their song, "Lift Every Voice and Sing," which we sang, became known as the Negro National Anthem. Generations of black people have sung their song with pride. James was an educator, poet, novelist, diplomat, and civil rights leader. He cared deeply about his people, and he worked to improve their lives. In 1920, he became the executive secretary of the NAACP. Black culture was important to James. He wrote many important books about black people's contributions to music, religion, and theater. He also wrote a novel called The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man. James also served as a diplomat and consul for the United States in Venezuela and Nicaragua. So this is the man that we just sang his song. So it's perfect because it gives a little background and there's also a picture. Now, some of the ones I picked, there's so many, there's just too many good ones. But what I was going to say is this is how many people are included. They have 49 black heroes in the book, and there's numerous examples of their life achievements. And this is all that's in this book, that every one of these 49 people, what it touches, their things that they do. Actors, astronomer, athletes, artists, authors, dancers, educators, editors, explorers, champions, lawyers, singers, storytellers, scholars, sculptors, playwrights, poets, ministers, historians, congressmen, and U.S. Supreme Court justice, and fur traders. For everyone, almost this is covered, and sometimes it's covered doubly. It's not just in one time. But what was interesting is, and the only thing I'm worried about is I don't know if I'll say his name properly, but someone can correct me if it's not true. Chicago, Illinois is the largest city in the United States, but few people know it was founded by a black man. And I think it's Jean Baptiste de Sabal, I think it is, or it could be Jean Baptiste de Sable. So either way, I'm not sure. One's a little more French. He was born in 1745, and he died in 1818. His birthplace was Haiti. He was the founder of Chicago, but few people know that he was, Illinois is the largest city in the United States, but few people know it was founded by a black man. Jean was born in Haiti, the oldest black republic. He moved to St. Louis, Missouri, where he became a fur trader. When the British took over St. Louis, Jean moved to Peoria, Illinois, where Native Americans helped him establish a successful trading business. Jean made trips to Canada to bring back furs. He always passed a place called Esh-Shai-Kagav, that he used as a lookout point. In 1774, he built a cabin there for his family. Other pioneers built stores and homes near his post. The settlement grew into a city that became Chicago. Many years passed before Jean was credited with the founding of Chicago. In 1978, he was finally recognized as the man who founded one of the greatest cities of the world. So that was new to me, and I don't know if it's new to you. Another interesting one, and they have Aretha Franklin, they have blues singers. I mean, there's just too many. I can't say them all. But another one that was interesting to me is Lorraine Hansberry. These both were very interesting, and I don't know if I'll have time to read, but I'll try. But she wrote I saw the movie on TV, and somebody mentioned it in your poem, Raisin in the Sun. You mentioned it. I saw it on TV, and I think Sidney Poitier was in it. I saw the movie on Turner Classics or whatever. Lorraine Hansberry was born in 1930. She passed away in 1965, and her birthplace was Chicago. She's young, gifted, and black. And this is from a little quote from her Act 2 of her play. And it says, the name of the play is To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. I care, I admit it, she says. I care about it all. It takes too much energy not to care, she said. When Lorraine Hansberry was a girl, her family moved to a white neighborhood, and that's what her play is about in the movie. Very good. It was during a time when black and white people, usually lived in separate parts of town. Many of their neighbors were angry when the Hansberry family had moved into a white section of town. When Lorraine walked to school, many people called her names and made fun of her. She was very frightened. Lorraine never forgot how hard her family had fought against discrimination. Her famous play, Raisin in the Sun, is about a black family that wants to move into a white neighborhood. It is also about the love, pride, and strength that holds many black families together. Raisin in the Sun was the first play by a black woman to be produced on Broadway. Lorraine died at an early age, but many people consider her to be one of America's finest playwrights. Okay, I might have time for, I don't know, one more, well, maybe two. I want to end with the poet. Here's another interesting one. Matthew Henson went to the North Pole. But this was interesting to me, and I was teaching this, but I've been retired for a while. Matthew Henson was born in 1866, and he died in 1955, and his birthplace was Charles County, Maryland, and he's a great explorer. In March of 1907, Matthew Henson and Admiral Robert E. Peary set out to reach the North Pole. They had tried twice before, but the frigid weather and rough terrain stopped them. This time, they were determined to reach their goal. On April 6th, the two explorers were only a few miles away from their greatest triumph. Peary was ill, so his black assistant continued. Matthew Henson placed the American flag at the North Pole. Matthew had always liked adventure. As a teenager, he joined the crew of a ship bound for China as a cabin boy. He also sailed to Europe, Africa, and the South Pacific. Matthew was 21 when he met Admiral Peary. They made many trips together. During the Admiral's expeditions to the North Pole, Matthew played an important role. He spoke the language of the Eskimos. He built sleds and trained teams of dogs. He solved many problems and gave valuable advice. That was Matthew. Now, this is the most important, listen to this. Nearly 81 years went by before accomplishments of this great explorer were finally recognized. On April 6, 1988, Matthew's remains were reburied with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C. His great feat had finally been acknowledged. Okay, so there's many more I can do, but I'm going to end with one more. I'm going to end with a poet. I have a little place here. Phyllis Wheatley. Phyllis Wheatley. She was born in 1753, and she died in 1784. Her birthplace was Senegal, West Africa. And in quotes, it's a poet for her times. And she wrote, "Soon many people began to read her poetry. One of her poems was dedicated to George Washington, brought her much attention. In 1773, Phyllis published a collection of poems entitled Poems on Various Subjects, Religious and Moral." And a little quote from To His Excellency, George Washington. This is a little part of her poem. "The goddess comes, she moves divinely fair. Olive and laurel binds her golden hair. Wherever shines this native of the skies, unnumbered charms and recent graces rise." And that's part of her. Phyllis was very young when she was stolen from her parents and brought to America. She would never forget her parents, her African home, or her trip on the horrible slave ship. She was brought by the Wheatleys, a family of white merchants. As their slaves, she had to do whatever they asked. But the Wheatleys soon realized that Phyllis was a very special child. They taught her how to read and write, and by the time she was 14, she had written her first poem. So and there's Cassius Clay's in here. They have the gold medalists, all the gold medalists that won. Wilma Rudolph, Willie Mays, Jesse Owens. And it just goes on, and all the, like I said, the pictures are great, and they have Cassius Clay, and it was just a perfect book. Book of Black Heroes from A to Z, and I enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed a little bit too.
I'm going to read from one of the American Girl books. This is Changes for Addie. If you have any children, you might know about these books. well, let's see, the children now are like in their 30s, but I would buy these books for my nieces, because with my own girls, they were a little bit old for them, but American Girls is a collection of dolls, and then the dolls have stories. So they have Addie, who is a courageous girl determined to be free in the midst of the Civil War. So there's a collection, their stories go on and on, so this is just one book that, this is book number 6. And I'm not sure how many they have, but my niece left this, so I have this book. She left it behind. So I'm just going to read some of it. This is at this point in the story, the Civil War has ended and the family is free, and so it was during a time where people were still looking for family members and trying to get their lives as free people together. So Addie is about 8, 9 at this time. Okay, on a wet and windy afternoon in early December, the door to Mrs. Ford's shop flew open. Addie and Sarah rushed inside. The door slammed shut behind them so hard it rattled the windows. "We're sorry, Mrs. Ford," Addie and Sarah said. "We don't just stand there, well, just don't stand there dripping on the floor, girls," Mrs. Ford said briskly. "Go over to the stove and dry off." Addie's mother smiled from where she sat at the sewing machine. "Y'all getting late here from school. It's so cold, I thought you'd run all the way." "We stopped at the Quaker Meeting House to see if Mr. Cooper had any news about Esther, Auntie, Lulu, and Uncle Solomon," said Addie, but he didn't. Mama took Addie's hat off and smoothed her hair. "Well, we just gotta hope he hears something tomorrow then," she said. "He probably won't," said Addie with a sigh. She peeled off her mittens and held up her hands to the warmth of the stove. More than a year ago, Papa and Sam had been sold off Master Stephen's plantation, and Addie and Mama had run away, leaving baby Esther behind with Auntie Lulu and Uncle Solomon. The war had been over since April, and Papa and Sam had joined them in Philadelphia, but Addie's dream of having her whole family together in freedom was taking a long time to come true. Papa had gone back to the Stevens plantation last summer to find Esther, Lulu, and Solomon, but they had left and no one knew where they'd gone. Papa had searched several freedmen's camps near the plantation, but after a month he had returned to Philadelphia. Since then, Addie had helped write letters each week to aid societies and freedmen's camps to see if anyone, anywhere, knew anything about her family, but no one ever answered. "I know you're feeling discouraged," said Mama kindly, "but we can't stop hoping. The only way you get what you want is by hoping and working hard." "Your mother is right," Mrs. Ford said, "and she's been working hard. We both have. With the new sewing machine, we'll make twice as many dresses as we did by hand." "And that means me and Addie are going to have twice as many dresses to deliver," said Sarah. "And that means we're going to make twice as much tip money," said Addie with a smile. The whole Walker family was saving money so Papa could make another trip to search for Esther, Lulu, and Solomon. "There's plenty for you girls to do today," said Mrs. Ford. "In addition to the deliveries, I need you to pick up 2 dresses for alterations and go to the dry goods store." "We better get started then," said Addie, putting on her mittens and hat. But Sarah wasn't ready. She was taking off her boots. "Mrs. Ford, I don't mean to bother you, but do you have any extra paper for me to put in my boots?" she asked. "Child, what do you need another pair of, what, you need another pair of boots?" Mrs. Ford said. "Sure do, ma'am," Sarah said, pulling wads of dirty, wet paper out of her boots. "These is too small, but my folks can't afford to buy me new ones yet. I'm gonna get new soles for these, that's cheaper." Addie saw that Sarah's stockings were wet to the ankle. There was a hole as big as a $50 in one boot, and the sole was nearly ripped off the other. Mrs. Ford handed Sarah the newspaper. Sarah took a few minutes to fold it and stuff as much as she could into each boot, and then she put her boots back on. "The paper should last till I get home," she said, "if I don't go through too many puddles." The girls gathered the packages Mrs. Ford had wrapped and headed for the door. "Y'all take care of crossing the streets," Mama reminded them. "We will," they promised. "And for goodness sake, don't let the door slam." Addie smiled at Mrs. Ford and made sure she closed the door quietly as she and Sarah left the shop. It wasn't sleeting now, but there was still a strong wind. The streets were crowded with people rushing along, trying to get out of the cold. Addie held her armful of packages close to her chest to keep them safe. "The first address is over on Commerce Street," she said to Sarah. They turned right at the corner, but Sarah turned left. "Where are you going?" Addie asked her. "Commerce Street is this way." "You're right," said Sarah, smiling. "I don't know what I'm thinking." And as they walked along together, Sarah said, "Things sure have changed since last year. Back then, you would turn the wrong way, not me. You hardly knew anything about Philadelphia back then." Addie smiled. "You're the one who taught me how to find my way around. I couldn't even read the addresses on the packages. Now you read better than me." "That's why Reverend Drake gave you the most important part to read in the celebration at church on New Year's Eve." Addie made a face. "I'm kind of nervous about that," she admitted. "The Emancipation Proclamation is hard. It's got big words in it. I don't even understand it." "I can help you practice it," Sarah cheerfully. "I'd like that. Come to my house Saturday after we make deliveries and help me." On their way to the first delivery, they passed the Institution for Colored Youth. Addie stopped to pull up her knee warmer. She stared at a group of students coming out of the brick building. They were carrying stacks of books, and they were laughing and talking together. "Miss Dunn says you can be a student at the Institute when you're 11, Addie said to Sarah. "That means you and me, we could be here next year and study to be good teachers like Miss Dunn. Wouldn't that be good?" She straightened her back and held her head high, the way Miss Dunn did. Sarah looked wistful. "It would be." Then she nudged Addie, "But we better get on with these deliveries. My feet are getting wet every minute." "You're right," Addie said. As they walked on, she looked back at the Institute, thinking how wonderful it would be if she and Sarah were students there. And my time is up. And the author of this book is Connie Porter, and she's written a lot of the books for the American Girl series. And she grew up near Buffalo, New York, where the winters are long and hard. So, anyway. Good evening. My name is Emma Hill, and I will be reading from my own book. This book was published in 2017, and it's called Pray Every Day. And there is a history behind my prayer journey in my life. Today is a special day. Today is my oldest daughter's birthday. And my firstborn, I was young and stupid when I was pregnant with her, and I had a difficult pregnancy. And my grandmother was my mom's mom. And she just said, "Baby, pray for her. Pray, pray." So I had a problem, and the doctor thought I was going to lose her. So he put me on bed rest for 3 months. And I couldn't even get up to go to the bathroom. I had to literally sit there for 3 months in the bed. So after doing all of that, he couldn't find a heartbeat. So he decided to put me in labor with her. And sure enough, she came out early, weighing 4 pounds, and she lost down to 3. I had to leave her in the hospital for 3 months without her. So my prayer journey at that time was to bargain and make a deal with God. And God, if you do this for me, this is what I'll do for you. Fast forward to today, it's her birthday. She's 47, and her husband wrote a tribute for her I would like to share with you today on Facebook. It had me in tears, so forgive me. He wrote, "Today is a special day. On this day in the year of 1972, the woman who would become my world was born. Over the past 29 years, Tina has been my muse, my motivation, my confidence, my inspiration, my mentor, my champion, the mother of my children, my counselor, my coach, the person that compels me to be honest with myself, the person that inspires me to overcome my shortcomings, and so much more. To this day, she challenges me to be the best version of myself. However, enough about me. Dr. Bertina Black is a force all unto herself. While engaged in stellar performances as a mother, wife, daughter, sister, aunt, cousin, friend, student, professor, etc., she managed to raise and inspire exceptional, born to herself and other children. achieved the highest level of academic success. Her countless numbers of emotional compromised and resource disadvantaged children support individuals enduring personal hardship and enable our nation's military veterans to succeed in their post-service endeavors. This is obviously a mere summary of Bertina's character and accomplishments. The preceding narrative barely touches the surface of her half-century of service, nurturing, and personal achievement. I only wish I had the talent, words, and time and space to express my full admiration for her accomplishments. However, in lieu of those resources, I simply wish her a happy birthday, and I love you to life. Isn't that beautiful? Her husband wrote this. Fast forward to this book, 2002, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I thought God gave me a raw deal, so I decided to stop praying. Enough of this God stuff already. Do not talk to me about prayer. So I had a lot of friends all over the United States who decided, I'm going to pray for you, idiot, whether you pray for yourself or not. And I stopped talking to them because I didn't want to hear anything about prayer. So they emailed me prayers, they left messages on my phone, and once I was well over the healing and God brought me back to my senses, He told me to make a collection of prayers and put them in a book, and that's what this book was born from. What I would like to read from you is Phenomenal Woman. I couldn't get away from that by Maya Angelou. I met her, I think 2 or 3 times, and I saw her perform this poem. We went to the same school in Unity Village, Missouri. And just before she was to graduate, I think it was June the 9th, she died on May the 28th. So she was post-graduate, what did you get? Post-human. Her son received her reward. So I would like to share that from my book. And it's called Phenomenal Woman. Pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size. But when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my steps, the curl of my lips. I am a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. I walk into a room just as cool as you please. And to a man, the fellas stand and fall down on their knees. Then they swarm around me, a hive of honeybees. I say, it's a fire in my eyes and the flash of my teeth, the swarm in my waist and the joy in my feet. I'm a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. When I try to show them, they say they still can't see. I say it's in the arc of my back, the sun of my smile, the ride of my breast, the grace of my style. I'm a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't strut or jump about. I have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud. I say, it's the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hand, the need for my care, because I'm a woman, phenomenally, phenomenal woman, that's me. God bless you.
So about a year and a half ago, I was going into my favorite El Pollo Loco in Apple Valley, near where I live. And it was 1:30 in the afternoon. I get in line behind some people, and the man right in front of me was a black man, I estimated maybe in his 70s. And I said to him, you know, you would think you could come in here sometime and not have to get in line. You know, 1:30 in the afternoon, you should be able to just walk. He smiles, looks at me, he says, do you know why? I said, yeah, I know why. The food is really, really good. He says, yeah. So we're over at the soda machine, and I don't know why I said this, but I said to him, so what's your story? He looks at me and says, what? I said, well, you look like you got a story to tell. So we ended up having lunch together for about 2.5 hours. First thing he told me, he was 96 years old. I was a little bit off on my estimate. 96. And then he told me that his grandfather was a slave. And I'm starting to take notes at this point. And after about 2.5 hours, he told me, he says, I'm where I am today because I had a wonderful father. I thought, man, I imagine people have said that before. I just personally never have heard anybody say that before. And so I was kind of hooked. And I said to him, I said, you know, you've got the experiences and the values and the beliefs that the younger generation would really benefit from hearing. I said, why don't we write up your story? He says, what? So I talked a little bit more to him about it, and he finally bought into the idea. And I interviewed him probably 25 times over the 1.5 years. And this is the result, the story of Sandy Armistead, a black man's journey in a white man's world. And so I'd like to read to you just a small part of the first chapter. My legal name is Herman Edward Armistead. People call me Sandy. My birth date was a long time ago, October 10th, 1921. Right now I am a 97-year-old man, a happy and proud black man. My daddy always reminded me what happened in that year of my birth, just a few months before I was born, and he told me to never forget it. On Memorial Day, May 30th, 1921, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a 19-year-old Negro shoeshine boy got involved in a skirmish with a 17-year-old white girl. She was an elevator operator in the Drexel building at 319 South Main Street. He was headed to the top floor to a bathroom, the only one in the building he was allowed to use. Around 4 p.m., a clerk heard a scream and saw the young black man rush from the building. The elevator operator had cried out, but no one really knew what happened. The police were called, and the young man was taken into custody on the morning of Tuesday, May 31st. Sheriffs questioned the girl, but she didn't want to press charges. Attorneys and other businessmen who worked at the Drexel building vouched for the boy, stating that he didn't have it in him to assault that girl. But word got out, and blacks gathered at the Tulsa City Jail. They knew the 19-year-old boy, just by having a conflict with the girl, had done more than enough to get lynched. The young man was moved to a more secure jail at the top of the Tulsa County Courthouse. Armed white men gathered throughout the evening in the open area around the building. The black men who were on site returned to their homes to pick up rifles and pistols. White men tried to get the sheriff to give the boy up, but the lawmen turned them away. Tensions were mounting, as were the number of armed men surrounding the courthouse, blacks and whites. Hundreds of rabble-rousers, some on horseback, now stood around in mobs. A gunshot tore through the hot-blooded night, perhaps fired by a nervous trigger finger, but it led to a full-blown assault. At the end, 10 white men lay dead and 2 blacks. Men tried to break into National Guard armories, but were stopped. Some returned to their homes for arms and ammunition. Around 11 o'clock, unsuspecting patrons from a local theater were led out into the street, only to walk into thunderous gunfire. The desperation led to the looting of gun shops. This resulted in shattered windows, fires, and pouring of rioters into the Greenwood district, the most prosperous black community in the country at the time. Well, I'll spare you any more details, but the bottom line is that in about 24 hours, by the night of June 1st, whites had rampaged through Greenwood, and the Red Cross said about 300 people died. Not only was there shooting, but planes dropping sticks of dynamite. It was an all-out war. In the end, in addition to the dead, over 800 people were hospitalized. The boy was saved. They didn't lynch him. But I doubt he was ever going to be the same again. Can you imagine the fear that must have grabbed him by the throat? This whole blow-up became known as the Tulsa Race Riot of 1921. Welcome to my world. As I say, about 3 months later, my mother gave birth to me on the kitchen table in the Bronx, New York. I was lucky to be raised by a loving mother and father. I give them the credit for me being the man I am today and for the wonderful life I have lived. Thank you.
Can we have another hand for everyone who's spoken so far? Excellent, excellent, excellent. I mean, we've heard from and about Langston. We've heard Porter's recount of overworn shoes. I never knew about the Addies of the world and the American Girls stories. I didn't know that they had stories. I knew about the dolls, but I didn't know it was that grand, the whole production and the product, so that was really interesting. We heard from Elizabeth. We heard from Hanson finally getting his honor. I mean, interesting. We've just been all over the world just in this past hour or so. Phyllis Wheatley, poor child, poor stolen child. Some of us knew part of her story or most of her story. Just incredible history we're hearing. We hear about Henry, poor baby. I mean, a child dealing with the parents' cancer. And it's really powerful stuff. And then the Greenwood Rampage. I mean, who knew? And just how Dwight, we'd heard a little bit about, some of us had heard about Dwight's story or how he had met this gentleman, but to hear how much deeper the story is and was. And with your new book, congratulations. There's a book signing we'll tell you about later today. Yeah, I think that we have flyers on the back and talking about his book summit signing coming up. And then the founder of Chi-Town. I mean, that was really, really touching, interesting. I mean, I have learned a lot today. And then there were the Johnson brothers. I mean, Rita, great minds think alike, obviously. We were both stuck on those, the Johnson brothers and that great song. But we're going to actually have a redo of that song because, as you know, we kind of started in the middle earlier. I was going to hum the first melody just for those who didn't know it, but then the people, you know, everyone was so excited to join in that we started kind of in the middle of that song. So we're going to redo that stanza after my reading and right before we go to break, okay? So I'm going to read from a book titled Erasing Racism, and it's by Dr. Molefi Asante. I had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman. He was is the founder of the nation's first doctorate program in African American Studies. And he is a close friend of Dr. Maulana Karenga, who some of you may be familiar with, who created the Kwanzaa. Anybody heard of the Kwanzaa holiday that we celebrate at the end of the year? And he's a good friend of his, and I was able to frequent the Afro-American Cultural Center for years, and where Dr. Karenga had most of his speeches and where he operates out of. So again, the book is titled Erasing Racism by Dr. Malefi Asante. And I'm reading from chapter 4, and the title of this chapter is The Disorientation. A few years ago in New York City, a relatively well-to-do white man was kidnapped and held against his will for several days in a hole in the ground. The authorities searched numerous places for him, hoping to find him before a ransom was paid. When they finally found the man, he looked rather wild, and his demeanor suggested disorientation. He had been held by several Spanish-speaking kidnappers who had slipped him scraps of food every day, but kept him essentially in the dark. When asked what was the most difficult part of his experience, the man answered in words similar to these: "I thought I was losing my mind. I felt helpless. People were speaking in a language that I could not understand, but I knew they were speaking of me. It angered me that I had been caught in this situation. The worst thing was the possibility that I would actually lose my mind and never be found. It is an awesome achievement that in nearly 400 years of wilderness living, most African Americans have remained sane. In spite of the disabilities connected with dislocation, displacement, and detachment from historical and cultural roots, some wilderness dwellers have dared to reconnect with those roots. The need for reconnection exists because of the tragic tearing away of the very fiber of the African's soul in the process of enslavement, discrimination, and racism. Keeping their sanity has been a losing battle for too many residents of the wilderness. Since it is our different origin, our peculiar condition that launched us on this unique journey in the wilderness, it should not seem strange that we have wrestled Lucifer to maintain our sanity. When the ships of the souls came and we were torn away from familiar places and spaces and brought across the ocean to the Americas, we experienced mental, psychological dislocation. We were no longer oriented, and our disorientation became the first order of our lives. In the wilderness, our physical liberation would be achieved before our mental liberation. Thank you. So we are going to take a break, a brief break, before we open up the mic to others who would like to read. So I'd like everyone, since you're going to be standing to get up and enjoy some of those refreshments, stand up and let's try one more time to make sure we give the Johnson brothers their due. And since Rita and I both, saw fit to discuss them and present them today, let's go through that one verse one more time and lift every voice. Everybody ready? Okay, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as a rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing have not signed, please sign your name on the sheet in the rear of the room. And we'll reconvene in about 15 minutes. Does that work, Ari? Okay. All right, we're going to open up the mic even more, and we're going to start with another desert dweller, a very accomplished comedic writer, and more. She'll tell you more about herself. She's multi-talented. She'll tell you more than I'm going to tell you everything I know about her. Multi-talented instructor, dancer, like I said, a comedic writer, and she has previously blessed us with her presence and activity and active membership in our club too, so we're just really happy to see her again, happy to have her here to bless us with her talent. T. Faye Griffin!
You put a lot on that. Lord have mercy, only got 5 to 7 minutes. Google me, that's all. Just Google me. Today I stand here on the shoulders of Baldwin and Butler, Morrison, and Mosley, Ellison, Giovanni. I stand on the shoulders of Hughes and Hansberry. I'm going to read 2 pieces for you. The first one is of my favorite poet, Mr. Langston Hughes, and the other reading will come from my own book. The bookmark says reading from African American authors, and I'm an African American, and I'm an author, so there you go. I qualify. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll sit at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen. Not then. Because they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Mr. Langston Hughes. My mother was a domestic and a cleaning woman for Kaiser Hospital for many years. If my mother was not asleep, she was working. I was raised with a very strong work ethic. And that's why I have so many hyphenates. Google me. But the one thing that I benefited from my mom scrubbing toilets in Malibu and Brentwood and Bel Air and Beverly Hills is I was exposed to lifestyles and cultures that perhaps this little girl from South Central LA would not have been otherwise. And as a result, when I encounter certain situations, I have a different worldview. And this piece, very brief piece from my book, Morning Manna Wisdom Served with Humor and Heart, which is a devotional. I'm a Jesus freak, I don't care who knows it. This is a mini personal essay. It's called The Wild Man and the Colored Woman. Today I visited Wild Man's Civil War surplus store in downtown Kennesaw, Georgia, where I spent time chatting with its owner, self-proclaimed power honky Dent Myers. Bearded, bandanaed, and packing a loaded pistol on each hip, the woolly yet warm Dent is as much of a curiosity as his overstuffed store and the Confederate memorabilia it contains. Stocked to the rafters with rare books, antique guns, swords, uniforms, Sambo dolls, and all sorts of whatnots from the Civil War era through Reconstruction. The windowless storefront was stifling. Still, I couldn't pull myself away. After paying the admission price of 25 cents to step into the museum, a back room cordoned off with a chain, I stepped into a world nothing could have prepared me for. One long counter displayed a variety of Nazi paraphernalia, which was disconcerting enough. But then I made a sharp right turn and suddenly came face to face with a mannequin dressed in a stained and yellowed Klansman robe and hood. A handwritten note that read, "1920s New England," was pinned to its faded sash, hanging loosely around the neck of the mustachioed dummy was a bullwhip, 2 thick ropes, each tied into a noose. My visceral reaction was quick and unexpected. Hot tears battered my eyes, my stomach rushed into my throat, and the last vestiges of air in my lungs was knocked clean out of me. I became that black washerwoman who dared to speak her piece, that young black man whose eyes rested too long upon the flesh of a white woman. I became the child whose black father mysteriously disappeared in the night. And for a moment, only a moment, I knew for the first time in my life the type of fear that is only spawned by hatred. But instead of fleeing, I allowed love to rise. Soon the wild man Confederate from Dixie and the wild-haired colored girl comedy writer from up north were able to find common ground on which to exchange genuine pleasantries about life, love, and legacies. Hatred lost that day. Chew on this. Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil, but cling to what is good. Romans 12:9. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Barbara Thomas, and she will be followed by Davida James. Next will be, I believe it's Peg Pollock, is that correct? Peg, and then Joe, and then Mary Thompson, in that order.
I'm not a speaker.
My mother just corrected me. She said she's not a speaker, she's a reader. So my mother had asked me to introduce her, or introduce this book. And some of you have heard me refer to this before. My sister-in-law, meaning my brother's wife, Dr. Duchess Harris, her mother's mother was one of those human computers that was portrayed in a movie that came out a few years ago, Hidden Figures with Kevin Costner and Taraji P. Henson. And so she has co-written a book called Hidden Human Computers. And it does include a passage in there. The one that I shared with the club before was that in the movie, there was a sign, I think it's a colored sign over the restrooms for, colored women only. And in the movie, it showed that Kevin Costner had gotten really frustrated at some point, and he took the sign down because his colored counterparts, staff had to go farther than others, than the whites had to go to use the restroom. And he just, again, was trying to make a statement, and he took down this colored sign, and it was real powerful. Even in the theater, people were cheering and everything. And it turns out that, of course, some of you know better than others. I'm going to refer to T-Fay again, as far as creative leverage that you take when you make a movie out of a book or vice versa. It turns out that in reality, my sister-in-law's grandmother was the one who, in real life, took that sign down. So this black woman herself got tired of seeing the sign, took it down. Her husband told her she better stop doing this kind of thing. She did it repeatedly, figured they're going to catch you one day and you're going to lose your job. She never lost her job, but I thought that was interesting how in the movie, how they changed it and had Kevin Costner do that. Anyway, my mom is going to read from this book written by her daughter-in-law. What's the daughter-in-law's name?
My daughter-in-law's name is Duchess Harris. And I'm reading Segregated Science. In 1950, NACA, NACA, purchased the property where it built Langley. Until that time, the land was legally the Chesterfield Plantation. Plantations were sprawling farms located in southern states, worked by enslaved Africans and African Americans. These slaves were among the ancestors of the black women who came to NACA during World War II to work as computers. NACA wants you was a sign. With the war effort, NACA needed to expand its number of employees and expand fast. The organization set out to recruit bright young minds in the chemistry and mathematics. They recruited not only to fill the greater need, more work than it could finish by a particular deadline. Another section would help. Did I skip a page? I think I did. Or did I? Well, anyway, this meant West area computers sometimes worked with their white counterparts, creating limited and temporary desegregation. The women noted that everyone worked together well, and there did not seem to be any bad feelings from the white computers or white male engineers. Although the West area computers worked with their white counterparts, not all the white computers realized there were black women doing this same job. The black computers remained invisible. Despite the discrimination, both the white and black women were happy to have these jobs. This was the first chance many of these black women had to do more with their mathematics degrees than teach. Although they did the same work as male junior engineers who earned a salary of $2,600 per year, the women, both white and black, were classified as sub-professionals, while the engineers were professionals. This meant that the women made only $1,440 per year as junior computers. It was not fair, but it was more than they would have made teaching, which was approximately $550 per year. The situation improved for the black computers after the Soviet Union launched Sputnik on October the 4th, 1957. I think a lot of us remember that. We'll tell our age. Sputnik was the first satellite launched into Earth's orbit, and it had been sent into space by a Cold War enemy. The United States was not officially at war with the Soviet Union, but the two countries often worked against each other. With this accomplishment, the space race was on. The US government wanted scientists to meet and do better than the Soviets. In part, this was a matter of technological pride. The United States did not want to be second best. It was also a matter of fear. If the Soviets could launch a satellite, US government officials worried the superpower would also be able to launch a nuclear strike. Space science could easily be used in weapons, and being second best could mean losing a war against the Soviets. The United States needed to move forward fast. So one of the nation's scientific centers, NACA, which is NACA, was transformed into the National Air and Space Administration in October of 1958. The name change reflected a change in focus from air flight to space exploration. I think I better slow down. To catch up to the Soviets, Americans who were interested and had the right skills needed to be educated in science. To make this happen, Congress passed the National Defense Education Act in August of 1958. Under the act, the federal government made loans and scholarships available to qualified students to study math and science. The United States also needed to make the best possible use of those who already had a science education. To do this, NASA, NASA, needed to use its resources well and end segregation. Among other changes, this meant no longer keeping the black computers separate in the West Building. But while this was a step in the right direction, it did not end unfair practices. As easily explained, NASA was made up of many of the same people who had worked at NACA. There was no equal opportunity office to go if there was a problem. It was up to individual managers to take action if and when something happened. By this time, the late 50s, NASA was employing even more black women. These women worked not only to meet the new U.S. goals to reach space, but also to achieve something closer to equality. Working toward equality meant challenging the status quo and changing the way things were done. Katherine Johnson had always been outspoken, and she did not change when she began to work at NACA. Christine Darden followed a similar path. She worked as a computer for 8 years, beginning in 1967. But after waiting through calculations for that long, she was ready to say something to her supervisor. She had been taking engineering classes through Langley and noted she did as well, if not better, than her classmates, who were mostly white engineers. Darden pointed out to her supervisor that she had a master's degree in engineering. She wanted to know why other people with their degree were working as engineers while she was still a computer. Darden's supervisor was impressed by her work and transferred her to an engineering section in 1973. Darden was one of the few women at that time who worked as an aerospace engineer. Fortunately, other people working at NASA were good at figuring out what it took to get ahead. Jackson was one of them. Despite the impressive work Jackson did in aerodynamics, she is best known for her efforts in fighting for equal opportunity. She realized minorities and women at NASA did not always get promotions as quickly as they should. She took a careful look at what might be holding them back. Sometimes they were not quite as well educated as other workers, lacking just a few classes. Other times they worked in a division that was sometimes overlooked, or they did not work on attention-getting assignments. She also noted how women were often stopped short from advancing in their jobs, largely because they were women. Others saw her progress and followed her in her footsteps. Although Jackson enjoyed engineering, she applied for a position in equal opportunity. After being trained in Washington, D.C., Jackson returned to Langley in 1979 and worked as an affirmative action program manager and federal women's program manager. She was able to make changes that helped minorities and assist managers in noting the accomplishments of their minority and female employees. Oh, I didn't tell you my name. What's my name? Oh. My name is Barbara Thomas, and I'm the mother of Cheryl and 3 others. grandmother of what? 4, and great-grandmother of 2.
Good evening. My name is Davida Siwisa James, and I am a writer, but I'm not reading from my own books tonight. I do have 2 quick anecdotes before I read a poem by Nikki Giovanni. One is that I brought my autographed copy that Maya Angelou autographed for me of her book, I Shall Not Be Moved, when it first came out in 1990. And Rita mentioned, I was born in the Congo. I walked to the Fertile Crescent and built the Sphinx. I designed a pyramid so tough that a star that only glows every 100 years falls into the center, giving divine, perfect light. I am bad. I sat on the throne drinking nectar with Allah. I got hot and sent an ice age to Europe to cool my thirst. My oldest daughter is Nefertiti. The tears from my birth pains created the Nile. I am a beautiful woman. I gazed on the forest and burned out the Sahara Desert with a packet of goat's meat and a change of clothes. I crossed it in 2 hours. I am a gazelle so swift you can't catch me. For a birthday present when he was 3, I gave my son Hannibal an elephant. He gave me Rome for Mother's Day. My strength flows ever on. My son Noah built new ark, and I stood proudly at the helm as we sailed on a soft summer day. I turned myself into myself and was Jesus. Men intone my loving name. All praises, I am the one who would save. I sewed diamonds in my backyard. My bowels deliver uranium. The filings from my fingernails are semi-precious jewels. On a trip north, I caught a cold and blew my nose, giving oil to the Arab world. I am so hip, even my errors are correct. I sailed west to reach east and had to round off the earth as I went. The hair from my head thinned and gold was laid across 3 continents. I am so perfect, so divine, so ethereal, so surreal, I cannot be comprehended except by permission. I mean, I can fly like a bird in the sky.
Mary asked me to read these poems, so I said, yes, ma'am. This is Lucille Clifton. Whose side are you on? The side of the bus stop woman trying to drag her bag up the front steps before the doors clang shut? I am on her side. I give her exact change. And him, the old man hanging by one strap, his work hand folded shut as the bus doors. I am on his side when he needs to leave. I ring the bell. I am on their side riding the late bus into the same someplace. I am on the dark side, always the side of my daughters, the side of my tired sons. This is rap lyrics about famous African Americans. Henry Hank Aaron. Henry Hank Aaron was the home run king. He stepped to the plate with home run swing. When he stepped to the plate, you could see that he was great, and he ran around the bases as the ball took wing. Marian Anderson. Marian Anderson sang like a bird. People loved to hear her as she sang every word. Though born in Philadelphia, she traveled near and far, and she sang so beautifully, she became a star. Benjamin Banneker. Hickory dickory dock, Banneker made a good clock. Benjamin Banneker loved math and the stars above. Hickory dickory dart, Banneker was very smart. Mary McLeod Bethune. Mary Bethune worked all her life. She saw some good times, she saw some strife. She believed in education for the people of the nation, and she helped them find knowledge by founding a college. Greon Bluford. Greon Bluford loved to fly, fly, fly. He flew in an airplane in the sky, sky, sky. He flew in a spaceship out of sight, 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 and returned 6 days later in the night, night, night. And Gwendolyn Brooks. Gwendolyn Brooks loved to write during the day and into the night. Her poetry won a Pulitzer Prize. It brought tears to the judge's eyes. And a poem by Gwendolyn Brooks. We real cool. The pool players, 7 at the Golden Shovel, we real cool. We left school. We lurk late, we strive straight. We sing sin, we thin gin. We jazz June, we die soon.
My name is Joe Pollack. My name is Joe Pollack, And I was asked to read these as well, or something. I picked a few short ones because we're trying to get home tonight before the snow. This is Gwendolyn Brooks, Sadie and Maud. Maud went to college, Sadie stayed at home. Sadie scraped life with a fine tooth comb. She didn't leave a tangle in, her comb found every strand. Sadie was one of the livingest chits in all the land. Sadie bore 2 babies under her maiden name. Maud and Pa and Papa nearly died of shame. When Sadie said her last so long, her girls struck out from home. Sadie had left as heritage her fine tooth comb. Maud, who went to college, is a thin brown mouse. She is living all alone in this old house. This might be appropriate because of what may happen tonight. This is Richard Wright, How Lonely It Is. How lonely it is. The snowstorm has made the world the size of my yard.
I'd like everyone to join me in just a few moments of silence for one of our great writers, authors, playwrights, scholars, poets who passed away last October. You may be familiar with Ntozake Shange. Any remember her? She wrote For Colored Girls Who Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Was Enough. That was a play that she wrote. It was a hit on Broadway. It was later made into a TV movie, and it started out actually as a poem. And again, she recently passed. And it turns out she and I shared a professor at USC. When I was in grad school there, a professor who became one of my best mentors and dear friend mentioned her to me and said that she had been one of his star students. I guess that was the way to egg me on to greatness in this class. This was the standard bearer. Anyway, so let's take a few minutes of silence to remember her and her greatness and her contribution. Thank you for that. I also happen to have a copy of one of my favorite books she wrote. Sassafras, Cypress, and Indigo was her first novel. So again, you know how a lot of times you write a lot of things and one of your writings or works gets, well, you become popular for something you've written, maybe your 10th writing, and then all your old stuff now, you know, is desired. So this is what happened with this book. It became popular sort of late in the game, or after she had gotten a lot of acclaim before. But I did want to just read a little bit from this. Backstage, and the dressing rooms already smelled like sweat and sweet perfumes to mute incipient funk. Cypress just about shoved Sassafras into Malik's arms, trying to get to a table with a mirror. Sassafras was feeling in the way and decided to sit in a corner until the dancers were ready to get into costumes. Cypress sat down and proceeded to pile all different containers of stage makeup in front of her. She had to paint her face for the dress rehearsal to see how a new design would look. When she finally finished, there wasn't a flesh-colored speck from her shoulders to her hairline. Cypress was the blue of prize Navajo turquoise, with yellow spirals racing down her cheeks. She was the Milky Way at dawn, and Malik was painted scarlet with comets flaring across his chest. Layla and Melissa were passion flower orange, with flame tips around their eyes. Eddie and Guy were brazen sunlight yellow. In tights and knitted leotards, everyone went through warm-ups on the floor with Ariel, who insisted on wearing his sequined and satin cape for good luck with the spirits. Stretches and lifts were mostly what Ariel had them doing, and Cypress managed to ease over to Malik in the back line so he could discuss some business. In the middle of the high kick series, Cypress stage whispered, "Malik, you got any corners on some blow?" Malik smiled, but braced up real quick because he had missed a kick trying to listen to Cypress. Malik was one of those thin, dancing men, but without knobby bones sticking out of every crook of his body. Malik was live like nobody since the Step Brothers, and he was in love with Cypress, as much as any dancer loves somebody besides dance herself. Malik was puzzled by Cypress's inquiry. She didn't ever buy any dope at all. She was just around when somebody else had, or maybe she wasn't. Cypress didn't yearn for any snow, and Malik was very cool about his business off the dance floor. "I don't know now, Cypress. Maybe I'll let you know." Meanwhile, Ariel had focused on the pair whispering in the rear and shouted clear across the room like an expected blowout, "Malik, Cypress, get those legs up and keep your hips front." Cypress stopped thinking about anything besides her body movement until after the performance. Thank you. So I would like to, again, I'm just going to acknowledge those who read in the second half. Wow, again, it was great, just the diversity of subjects and presentation styles. And I thought it was really interesting that we had the human computers hidden, just I thought it was interesting how they changed the name from hidden computers to human computers from the book to the real life, and again, taking that creative, I guess, leverage. I thought it was interesting, this ego tripping. I mean, I hadn't heard that one, but I felt like I must have been listening to her. It was so authentic, so thanks for that wonderful presentation. And really, let love be without hypocrisy. Isn't that a great goal for us to have? So difficult, but again, lovely, well presented. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then the rap lyrics, I mean, Hank Aaron, all of our heroes, one of the, certainly the great American heroes, and Gwendolyn Brooks and Sadie, and then Richard Wright, how lonely it is. Isn't the writer's life often lonely? We talk about that a lot, right? But anyway, it's wonderful when we can get together, get out of our shells, and share our works and enjoy sharing the works of others. So we thank you so much for participating. This has been enriching, especially for our first effort here. Again, thanks to Mary for coordinating it. Thanks to Rita for bringing the snacks. Thanks for everyone who has participated, and Bob in setting up the sound system. And we hope to see you again soon at any of our Writers Club meetings and or other events that we might have.